Welcome back to Law and Crime Report. My name is Bianchi. I'll be your host. We got a lot of great topics on the schedule for you today. Let's start off with some of the most pressing news that you guys were listening to over the weekend. The bomber in Nashville, Tennessee has been identified as Anthony Warner, who's 63 years old. Let me give you a brief rundown of some of this. As you heard it at 6:30 on Christmas morning, he exploded a van in front of an AT&T building. He has now died in the bombing. The blast was extraordinary and damaged pretty much dozens of buildings on a city block. 3 people were injured, and he knocked out the AT&T wireless facility. There's no indication that anyone else is involved. They still don't know a motive, but you can be assured that they are looking for it. And this case was solved through tips from the local police agencies, as well as vehicle identification numbers and DNA matches. So they are extremely confident that this is the individual that had done this. He was not on law enforcement's radar prior to this. And the interesting part of this and the weird and strangeness of it is that the van was giving messages as it was going through the street in the early Christmas morning hours, basically telling people to escape because there was going to be an explosion, and was actually giving a countdown to that explosion. And then the odd twist is he was playing the song at certain points in time for Petula Clark, Downtown. You may remember that song. It's one of the first songs I remember as a kid. So that was of interest to me. But let's look at the idea that these police officers and the bravery of these officers with regard to them running into the situation, and they were trying to evacuate people when they got a 3-minute warning that the explosion was about to go off, and the explosion did. They put themselves in harm's way, saved lots of people. Some of those officers were injured, and from the press conferences, you can see many of those officers. There's the explosion right there that you see. It was of a tremendous impact that came from that RV. Those windows have been blocked out. Officers were actually surrounding the vehicle looking for tags and identification prior to that explosion. So you see law enforcement at its best there for sure. Let me bring in 2 of my great guests that I have today. Gigi Gonzalez out of Miami, Florida, DNA criminal defense lawyer, that being a father who was giving her tutelage along the way, just like myself, worked in the back room and her way all the way up to being a successful and awesome criminal defense lawyer. And we also have with us Neama Rahmani out of Los Angeles, California, a former AUSA out of San Diego, president and CEO of West Coast Trial Lawyers, specializing in catastrophic injuries. And I was impressed to hear that they have received over $1 billion, that's with a B, in settlements and judgments. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Yeah, awesome to have you guys here. So listen, Gigi, let me throw to you first here. This is obviously a strange situation. It, by all indications, investigators, when you're looking into a crime like this, like I used to do when I was a prosecutor, are going to be looking at various things. And one of those things is going to be whether or not this person was looking to cause damage to individuals. But it would seem, Gigi, that was not the case here. What do you thought?
Yeah, I have to applaud the Nashville Police Department for their quick intervention. It was their investigation and their steadfastness in resolving this that saved lives. So just a really quick applause to them. And I gotta ask if he really did intend to hurt people and to kill people. If he had that warning, that siren in the middle of the night, early morning, saying 3 minutes till blast off, everyone get out. I think he was definitely trying to inflict as much damage as possible, but that warning tells me that maybe he didn't want to actually hurt anybody, but to maybe send a message. I would love to know what his motive is, and I'm sure that the police department and FBI will do everything in their power to figure it out.
Yeah, Neama, to that point, that's it. That's what the question is about. One, is there going to be anybody else that's involved in it? So far, law enforcement has ruled that out. And then secondarily, what was the motivation behind this? Just to give the audience a little background, Warner was issued an explosive user permit handler's license in November of 2013. And interestingly, in November of 2013, an alarm contractor license. He worked in IT. He was a computer person. And one of the people that was interviewed that knew him said, Tony Warner, we knew, is a nice person who never exhibited any behavior which was less than professional. I'd imagine, Neama, that they're going to be really looking through the electronic records and doing a psychosocial history, which includes witness interviews, family, friends, and things of that nature. What are your thoughts on how the investigators are going to go about trying to establish a motive in a case like this? Remember, I think it's Las Vegas. To this day, I don't think we have a motive for that mass shooting.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Bob. I mean, already law enforcement, they've executed search warrants. They've gone into his residence. They've talked to family members. That's actually how they got the DNA to identify him. But, here you have an individual in Warner, never been on law enforcement's radar. Just like Gigi said, he clearly wasn't trying to inflict mass casualties because of the timing of the explosion and the warnings. That's not common. This wasn't a busy Friday afternoon, as law enforcement said. This is early in the morning, Christmas Day, with warnings to folks to evacuate. So, it's unclear what the motivation was, whether this was really just a big suicide attempt, which was successful, and an attempt to inflict damage on the AT&T building, which was adjacent there, because at least as of the information we have now, there is no clear motive, no ideology, nothing that would suggest this is an act of domestic terrorism. As far as other folks involved, again, there's a couple property transfers to a woman, but that is the only other individual who may have had any involvement whatsoever in this explosion.
Yeah, and domestic terrorism is a word that people are being very careful in using if it's not connected actually to an ideology or for some political influence. We don't know. Some have suggested there may be a mental health illness because many people are out there thinking that AT&T's 5G network is getting into their brains and their heads. And I don't discount this. There are a lot of people out there, especially with these conspiracy theorists, and who knows if that was the motivation. Got to move on, guys, to something very interesting out of Detroit. Now, there were a lot of riots that occurred there after the George Floyd incident, and there was a lot of police-related activity. And Black Lives Matter sect called Detroit Will Breathe basically was out there protesting and demonstrating. They filed a lawsuit, many of the individuals that were arrested, indicating that the police used excessive force and that these individuals had their civil rights violated. Well, Detroit shot back in a very unusual way by filing a counter lawsuit in this case for civil conspiracy, arguing that this group, which is incorporated in the state of Wisconsin, this group actually formulated plans on social media platforms advocating violence against police officers. And I don't know if guys have had a chance to read this detailed counter complaint filed by the police department in the city of Detroit. They're not laying down. They gave very, Gigi, specific information about the social media posts that were out there, up to and including somebody saying take badges and teeth, and other videos that were ascribing to violence directed specifically at the police officers. Gigi, what do you think about this counter lawsuit? And can you please explain to the audience the difference between our First Amendment right to protest peaceably, as opposed to riotously?
Thank you. So the civil lawsuit, the countersuit by Detroit, it's not surprising. Anytime these cities or police departments or what have you, they get sued, they often file a countersuit to affirm some sort of defense, right? And here they're saying that these protests were not actually protests. They were thinly veiled guises to cause mass destruction and to attack police officers and public officials. Now, they may have evidence of this. They're going to have to prove that those people were actually involved in the protest with the organizers and that they acted in accordance with what the organizers organized within this protest was to attack cops. Now, we have the First Amendment right to protest. We have the First Amendment right to take to the street and petition for change. However, you do not have the right to go and riot and to use the reason why you're protesting as a way of getting what you want and to attack police officers and to cause destruction of public property. That is not a First Amendment right that is dedicated within the Constitution. And if it is true what the city of Detroit is affirming, the protesters are going to have to put up evidence that they were not involved in the planning of attacking police officers and go forward from there.
Yeah, Neema, the point that's interesting here is that I used to do civil rights work for many, many years. This is a very interesting lawsuit that there is a counter lawsuit, and all the ones I filed as a plaintiff's attorney, I never had a counter lawsuit filed. But I think what they're pointing to here is that this was an organized movement incorporated by the state of Wisconsin, and that these individuals, to Gigi's point, there are so many quotes that are in this counter lawsuit, which was clear to me. It was also a public relations document that they wanted to set the record straight that the individuals that are suing them and that were arrested did very specific acts, and they're listing those acts down, including certain points in time where they're reaching out through their social media platforms from their official organization saying, come on down, we're holding the streets. They're going to have to kick us out, throw us out, use whatever force to get us out. This is not acceptable in my mind. And I think the police department did this both from a public relations point of view, but also because it's an organization, there'll be discovery now. And they're going to find out where the funding is coming from, where the money is coming from. And they're going to also have Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent because they're still within the statute of limitations of potentially being charged with a crime still. And more evidence may come out because and you're a civil litigator, being plaintiffs, now they have to speak where they otherwise didn't have to before. What do you think?
Yeah, Bob, I agree. And I agree with Gigi as well. This is absolutely expected. If you're going to bring a civil lawsuit, you have to be prepared and anticipate these types of claims being made in terms of either an affirmative defense or a counterclaim. And that's what we're seeing here, right? Both on the merits and for PR purposes, right? I mean, let's take a step back. Black Lives Matter, they're the ones that initiated this lawsuit against the city, right? There was a lot of destruction. There was a lot of injuries that were caused, not by the peaceful protesters, but by the rioters, right? So, the fact that the city has filed a counterclaim is absolutely expected in a case like this. Now, really, what the counterclaimants need to do now is to tie those looters, those rioters, to the folks that are organizing the Black Lives Matter movement. So that's what you hit. What you really brought up is really that sort of discovery, right? And that's why they're going to social media and saying, hey, these individuals, this is why they should be properly associated with BLM, and that's why BLM should be responsible for the civil damages that resulted therefrom.
It's going to be a really interesting suit to follow. If our audience hasn't had an opportunity, try to read this counter complaint, because to the point of both of our great guests here, they are specifically tying in with quotes and actual evidence with regard to what it was that these individuals did to incite specific violence directed at the police. Guys, we got to take a quick break, but our next block is going to be filled with star-studded activity like Lori Loughlin, as well as the Tiger King, the guy that just won't go away. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Law and Crime Report. So we have two celebrities, if you will, quote unquote, that are always in the news. The first being Lori Loughlin was released from prison after having been sentenced to 2 months in federal prison and a $150,000 fine, which we understand has already been paid off, and another 100 hours of community service. I just want to refresh the audience's recollection that this was with regard to the college admission scandal in which he tried to scam, as it were, through the crimes of conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud to get her two daughters, Olivia and Isabella, admitted to the University of Southern California. Felicity Huffman, who was another person that was caught up in that whole sting with the individual that was at the centerpiece cooperating with the federal government, Rick Singer, she got 11 days. And Lori's husband, Massimo Giannulli, received a 5-month sentence and is expected to be released in April of 2021. So let me ask you, Gigi, when you look at this, she made a statement, Lori, at the time that this was going down, that I made an awful decision. I went along with a plan to give my daughters an unfair advantage in the college admissions process. And in doing so, I ignored my intuition and allowed myself to be swayed from my moral compass. Many people, Gigi, have been asking the question, was this a just punishment? There was a $500,000 bribe that was used in this particular case, according to the federal authorities. Does this meet justice? Does it balance rehabilitation and punishment and deterrence in this case, in your mind?
I think it does. Let me tell you why. You have a nonviolent crime where the defendant has taken responsibility, expressed remorse in her actions, and has pledged to never recommit. And those are the types of things federal judges love to see. They want to see a defendant take responsibility and acknowledge their wrongdoings and uh, do their time and go out in society becoming a reformed person. This crime, as we know, they typically the sentencing ranges from 2 weeks to 9 months. In this case, she earned 2 months. She did the crime. She pled guilty to the crime. She did her time. And I think that justice was served. And she's a high profile person who will go on and advocate against rich people trying to pay off other people to get their kids into college.
A rich person not to pay people off advocate. Okay, that's a little niche there. So hopefully she's listening to you, Gigi. You know, to your point though about rich people, I've always found this in the criminal justice system in general. A lot of people have feelings about rich people, where justice lies with them. Yes, I think it's true that a lot of times very wealthy and powerful people find it hard to find themselves when they get into trouble, having law enforcement charge them. But once they do, and the spotlight is on them, federal prosecutors love these kind of cases because they use their power, they use their fame, and they use their influence to get an advantage over other people. So I think that I agree with you to a certain extent. That time period is a little bit of a shot for her. But also, Gigi, talk to us about the collateral consequences that occur beyond the criminal justice system in these people's lives. If you looked at Lori Loughlin throughout the course of this, you saw literally on her face and in her body language, a person who was just disintegrating. There's a lot of pressure, embarrassment, reputational loss, a lot of collateral consequences. What do you think?
Oh yeah, a ton. This was America's sweetheart. Everybody loves Lori. Everybody grew up with her in their living rooms, right? So for her to have such a fall from grace, that's devastating for anybody. And, just taking aside the celebrity aspect of it, being charged with a crime is an incredibly life-changing event, whether you're guilty of the crime or not guilty of the crime. Going through court processes, being subjected to depositions, being subjected to hearings, to angry attorneys trying to get the truth or their version of the truth out. It's a very exhaustive period in a defendant's life. And, what I see in Lori is someone who accepted that and took responsibility and served out her time. And, to your point about rich people getting, better deals and whatnot, they just have access to more money for defense attorneys to pay even better attention to their cases than, for example, an indigent defendant who is relying on the services of a public defender who has 100 other cases that they have to devote their time to. So you see the disparities only because of the attention to detail that the attorneys can pay attention to in these cases. And, I don't really want to punish rich people for having the resources to defend themselves adequately when, quite frankly, everybody should have access to excellent attorney resources.
Okay, well, it took Lori a long, long time to get to the place where she recognized she did something wrong. Anyway, I'm curious, what do our people out there, our audience, what do you think? Was this a fair and just sentence, or was she given a break? I'd love to know your opinion. I definitely will check it out. Let's move on to the Tiger King, Joe Exotic. Here we are again, Gigi, talking about this. All right, just to set it up, he basically has been sending messages to the Trump administration that he wants his clemency. He wants to be pardoned, or he wants a commutation of his sentence. He wrote a 256-page letter to the president where he basically is extolling him, saying, please be my hero. Allow me to make you proud, to make America proud, to make the world proud. Be my hero, please, was part of that 256 epistle that Joe Exotic had written to the president. There were also supporters who paid $14,000 at a Trump hotel in May of 2020. Some suggest that was in order to curry favor. Don Jr., Trump, has also weighed in on all of this. So, Gigi, a lawsuit was filed against the DOJ by his attorneys, that's Joe Exotic's attorney, saying that the Office of Pardons at the DOJ rejected his application and that he has an absolute constitutional right to have the President of the United States himself personally review that application. That was the lawsuit that we were talking about last week that we thought would go nowhere. And here we are today. The lawsuit has been dismissed on the basis of, we believe the president knows about the application. I thought it was a stunt from the beginning. Gigi, what are your thoughts?
Oh, it's a stunt. It's a stunt. But let me tell you what. Well, first of all, let's just remind our viewers that Joe Exotic and, quite frankly, anybody, they do not have the absolute right to have their case considered for pardon or clemency by the president. Okay, that is a power designated to the president, and he can designate other offices, which the office of the president has done, to look through these applications and decide which ones have the most merit for the president to consider. Now, what I think is really interesting, Bob, and you hit on it, was that this was a lawsuit that was removed by Joe Exotic himself. Right. So that tells us maybe he knows a little something, something. And he's doing all the right things here. He's paying for play. He's making sure that Donald Trump is getting money in his pocket by Joe Exotic supporters. He's making sure Donald Trump stays in the news and keeps his ratings up by continuing to talk about this, filing for lawsuits, removing lawsuits, talking about those lawsuits, keeping Donald Trump's name in the headlines, which everybody knows President Trump absolutely loves that. And quite frankly,
Well,
Joe Exotic isn't even the most violent of pardoners to be considered. So he's got a shot.
Okay, we also know his name isn't Flynn, Kushner, Manafort, or Papadopoulos, and others. Let's go to a real quick clip of Trump being asked about the pardon.
There's been a show on Netflix called Tiger King.
Yeah.
And the man who's the star of this is a former zoo owner who's serving a 22-year prison sentence. He's asking you for a pardon, saying he was unfairly convicted. Your son yesterday jokingly said that he was going to advocate for it, and I was wondering if you've seen the show and if you have any thoughts on pardoning Joe Exotic.
Which son? It must be Don.
It was.
I had a feeling it was Don. Is that what he said? I don't know. I know nothing about it. He has 22 years for what? What did he do?
He allegedly hired someone to murder an animal rights activist, but he said that he didn't do that, and he was.
Do you think he didn't do it? Are you on his side?
Well,
Are you recommending a pardon?
No, I'm not advocating anything.
As a reporter, you're not allowed to do that. You'd be criticized by these. Would you recommend a pardon?
I'm not weighing in on Tiger
I don't
King.
think you would. I don't think you would. Go ahead. You have a question?
like Joe Exotic.
I'll take a look. Is that Joe Exotic? That's Joe Exotic.
Neema, I just whatever. Okay, there's the president talking about that, throwing the question back. Really genius how to evade it. But nevertheless, the Trump administration definitely knew about this case. Don Jr., as I talked about before, they were going at a Trump hotel. He's got lots of supporters that have advocated on his behalf. What do you think about all of this, both the lawsuit filed and the lawsuit now dismissed?
Yeah, I love the president answering a question with a question. So, as Gigi said, the lawsuit has no merit whatsoever. Again, just another political ploy to get Joe Exotic out in the media. Obviously, the president loves that type of media attention, and he's been very, very liberal with pardon these past several days. So, I wouldn't be surprised if a pardon is coming, because you cannot put anything past this president when it comes to pardoning and commuting sentences. This is a very high profile individual who has done everything he can to support this president, this lame duck president who's going to be out of office in a few weeks. So I agree with Gigi. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Exotic is going to receive that pardon he's been asking for.
Wow. And in other words, drop the lawsuit and let's see what happens. Wink, wink. Maybe I don't know. We are talking about a very serious conviction, guys. Excellent commentary as always. A woman, the only woman that was on death row, and we've been talking about this a lot with the moratorium having been lifted with executions federally. Well, she just got a little bit of a brief reprieve, maybe gets herself out of the death penalty. We'll talk about that on the other end of the break. All right, prisoner Lisa Montgomery, who is now 52 years of old, has made some really extraordinary news here. She was scheduled to be executed, and that execution was actually stayed by a court. The reason being is that the attorneys that represented her got COVID-19 and were not able to file a petition for clemency. And they argued that clemency is a quote unquote vital aspect of the criminal justice process. So the judge stayed the execution to give them the opportunity to do that. However, the Department of Justice and Bureau of Prisons rescheduled the execution date for, I believe, January 12th. And the judge also thumped them about doing that, saying that while there is a stay of proceedings, you cannot schedule an execution. Let me keep in mind one very important date. January 20th, 2021, President-elect Biden will be coming into office, and you can be relatively as guaranteed a bet as you can get that that moratorium will be put back in place and federal executions will cease as they have begun fast and furious since this past summer with the Department of Justice run under Bill Barr. Neama, this is something that just, I've been a death penalty prosecutor, so I come from that experience as a homicide prosecutor. And I was always concerned, especially with death penalty work, the ultimate punishment, that the system is just wrought with so many errors and so many problems. Even some lawyers who are better than other lawyers sometimes win the day. All those little nuances, like guys like you that get those billion-dollar settlements and judgments after all this time. Not to mention, in this particular case, the timing is what's important here. Could it be the mere fact that the lawyers just coincidentally got COVID-19 may be the very reason that she may be able to stretch it out by a couple of days and avoid being executed? Whereas if the judge lifts the stay, they are planning on executing her before President Trump leaves office. And I know that some people will say great for what she did. She murdered a woman who was pregnant and cut out her 9-month-old baby girl and kidnapped her. It was an absolute heinous crime. And many will cry execution. And the defense is saying she's mentally ill. She's got diagnosed mental disorders. She was abused. She shouldn't be executed. It just seems so wobbly to me. And this case points it out that just because somebody coincidentally gets COVID-19 and maybe the dog ate the police report, or maybe this or that or the other happens, it could make a difference as to whether somebody dies or not. So what do you think?
I mean, I agree. It's a particularly heinous and gruesome crime. I mean, if any case deserves the death penalty, this is it. But really, the problem here was the judge. The judge instituted a stay, but that stay is going to expire January 1st. So it's not surprising that the Bureau of Prisons decided to schedule the execution after January 1st. Had the judge pushed it out till after Biden's inauguration, President-elect Biden, then we might be dealing with a very different scenario. So I think really the issue that we're dealing with is a stay that was just too short. Had it been pushed out till the end of January or February, we wouldn't be having this problem. And I agree. I fully expect the new administration and the new attorney general to reinstate the moratorium on executions at the federal level.
Gigi, why do I think as a defense lawyer now, or even when I was prosecutor, that they are burning the midnight oil to find every single reason right now to extend the deadline of January 1st in order to slow down the execution, whether that's through other legal means or otherwise? And really, won't it come down to a judge who's going to say whether or not they want this person executed or not? Because the judge has a tremendous amount of discretion with regard to how the proceedings go forward. What's the defense doing right now to stretch this bad boy out?
Well, I don't think that they purposely contracted COVID to stretch this out, but I think they're doing everything short of contracting a deadly virus to make sure that they are able to extend this to a point where, President-elect Joe Biden takes office and the defendant here gets to enjoy that moratorium, right? They are definitely researching all available avenues. They're filing that petition for clemency for consideration. They're doing what they can here, and it's kind of exhaustive because minus the stay, this woman she's going to be put to execution, right? And they already have the date set up. They shouldn't have set up the date, but you already know where everybody's head is at as far as what their intent is for this defendant. And don't get me wrong, she has been convicted of an absolutely atrocious, heinous crime. It's absolutely unforgivable. With that said, this is also someone with severe mental health issues, with severe PTSD and dissociative disorders. This is not your average serial killer. This is someone who's mentally disturbed, and we have to consider what kind of society we live in if those are the types of people we're executing.
Yeah, well, and I didn't mean to suggest, Gigi, that they got COVID on purpose. What I'm trying to suggest is that the randomness of something like that. But right now, I'm sure they're doing everything legally to find something that can stretch it out. What that will be, we will wait to see. But again, a death of a human being, one way or the other, having done a horrible thing, is going to depend on moments, and whether or not the legal team can extend it. We got to switch gears real quick. You know the Corn Ray killer case. We covered it gavel to gavel here on the Law and Crime Network. The defendant was Todd Mullis, who was convicted of killing his wife, Amy Lynn Mullis, last year. Well, her family, the estate of the family, is filing a lawsuit against the defendant, seeking damages. And Amy's parents and children are listed. The children are 9, 11, and 13 as individuals who they believe should be compensated. The lawsuit basically says that the defendant breached his duty of care to the plaintiffs by stabbing Amy Lynn Mullis to death in 2018, and he was negligent in the homicide. Let's go to a clip of Mullis on cross-examination during the course of his trial, where the prosecutor's asking him questions. Mullis trying to say that it was an accident, but then at a certain point in time, the defense agreed during the trial it was a homicide, just that Mullis wasn't the perpetrator. But if prosecutors say he set this whole thing up, including having his kids find the mother. Let's take a listen to the prosecutor's cross-examination.
Now, Todd, here I'm gonna play you the part where you're doing the chest compressions, and I'm just gonna ask that you listen in between the chest compressions, okay? Now, Todd, did you just hear that whisper at the end of that?
Yes.
And what did you whisper?
I couldn't hear it.
Okay, I'm gonna play it again. Todd, do you whisper cheating whore right there?
No.
So you don't remember what you whispered?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna play another clip for you. Do you know what you whispered there?
No.
Did you hear that? So I'm gonna play that part one more time. The first clip is 6:53 of that second tape, and this second one is right at 0700. Just try to listen really closely. I just wanna know if you remember what you said. Right there, do you say go to hell, cheating whore?
No.
So you don't hear that?
No.
You didn't hear at 6:53, cheating whore. You didn't hear that?
I didn't hear that word.
And it's right at that, after you hear a ping, you don't hear go to hell, cheating whore.
No.
All right, Neama, first off, I got to give kudos to the prosecutor who knows how to ask a question the right way. It doesn't make a difference what he says. She's telling the jury what it says, and he can say no or yeah, it doesn't make a difference. So very good job. Kudos to the prosecutor. Damning information. But let me ask you, is this a viable lawsuit by the family suing for compensatory and punitive damages? Is this the kind of case you take on, especially considering that we always have to take into consideration whether the defendant has money to pay the judgment?
That's the exact issue, Bob, and I agree with the prosecutor. The prosecutor did a great job in this case. I watched the trial on Law and Crime, listened to that tape over and over again. I couldn't make out cheating whore, but as a prosecutor turned plaintiff's attorney, we take these cases on all the time. They're righteous cases, but the chance of collecting on this, almost none. This is going to be an easy layup, 8-figure verdict for the plaintiff's attorney. But unless Mullis hits the lottery or Powerball while he's spending the rest of his life in prison, that family unfortunately won't see a cent of that judgment. And that's unfortunately one of the problems with our civil justice system.
Okay, very good. We're going to have a little bit more about this case. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
I did not do this. This is supposed to be America where you have a fair chance of proving your innocence. But you shouldn't have to prove your innocence. Instead of the other way around, I thought it was guilty until or innocent until proven guilty. I feel this is the other way around. And I was a faithful and loving husband, and I never did this.
Okay, there he was claiming he was a loving husband. He didn't do it. Again, the defense had argued that it was a homicide at a certain point in time, not an accident, but that he just wasn't the perpetrator. Nevertheless, he was convicted. Gigi, on the civil suit that's filed by the estate of the family, they're arguing there that his actions in stabbing her were, and I'm quoting, negligent. He was negligent in the homicide. Is there a reason for that? Because if it's a purposeful or an intentional act, there may be some, if there's any insurance out there that would not cover purposeful or intentional crimes. Why are they calling this negligence when they went through such a hard way through the trial in the criminal cases saying that it was a purposeful and intentional act?
Maybe it's just it's an easier threshold to reach. If you're going to prove intentional actions by the defendant, you're going to have to put up some sort of proof to that. And if you could just prove that it was negligent, well, his conviction in this case, despite the fact that he denies it at sentencing, that's going to make a prima facie showing that the facts alleged in the criminal case are true. So in the event that he didn't commit first-degree murder, well, he was still negligent in throwing a corn rake into the back of his wife twice. He should have known that would have caused death, and he did it anyway, and that caused her death. So I think that just makes a civil case, like Neama said, a little bit easier to win.
Yeah, Neama, what do you think about that, though? I mean, give me in our audience and education, you're a great civil lawyer, about whether this could be possibly in play. An intentional act may or may not be covered by some sort of insurance, homeowners, I don't know, whatever may exist out there where a negligent act may. Do you see that as the reason?
Insurance coverage is always a reason. So first is the lower standard in a civil case, the preponderance of evidence versus beyond a reasonable doubt, that more likely than not. Obviously, negligence is easier to prove than an intentional act. There's generally no insurance coverage for intentional torts or intentional acts. Otherwise, Bob, I'd ask you to punch me, you hit me, you file a claim, and we split the money. So you really want to kind of allege that negligence to try to go after any insurance proceeds. I'm sure the insurance company, if any, at play here, is going to deny coverage, but that's why you make those allegations as a civil attorney, to try to squeeze whatever act there is into the hole of negligence and get that insurance coverage, if any.
Yeah, I think that could be the only thing here. And just a little bit of a correction, Neama, I am from Jersey, so if I punch you, you're not going to be around to collect any money. That's the way we roll over here in Jersey. But definitely, listen, I got to get to this story, guys. A Delta passenger slides out of a moving plane that was taxiing at LaGuardia Airport. And he was alleging that he was having a panic attack. He was with a woman and he was with a dog who was a service dog. They rushed themselves past the attendants, and he stated something to the effect the attendant says, "I need to get off the plane. I don't want to sit here. I'm going to pop the door." He actually pops one of the cabin doors. The slide slides open, and he, the woman, and the dog slide down the slide. They're later found in a restricted area, and they are charged with state crimes, the trespass and things of that nature. During the course of the arraignment, the lawyers argued that he is a person who is suffering from a mental health disorder and a panic disorder. And he said, and this is the defendant saying, quote, "I panicked. I have panic attacks. That's why I did it. It didn't hurt anybody. I have mental health issues." The dog was taken to a shelter, unfortunately, and then released to the woman that had slid down. So I've got 2 points to the story. Look, I get it's serious. It's a plane. Neama, I want to go to you first. It's something that you got to make sure you have safety with, but it is true that nobody was hurt. I actually feel bad for the guy. I think prosecutors show some level of mercy, not hit a fly with a sledgehammer in the case. And by the way, in honor of this case, I wore today my new Christmas present, my tie with Holly the legal beagle. And this little thing here is really a sock because I got corresponding socks just in honor of the answers that you two are about to provide. Neama, what do you think about what should happen with this case?
Well, we love Holly, the legal beagle. We love dogs, but you just can't do this, right? And I agree. I'm sure this case was referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office, like most of these cases at airports involving airplanes and that type of thing. They rejected it. It properly went state. He's likely looking at, some sort of misdemeanor charge. But, there's a lot of folks here. There's dozens of people on this plane. They had to be rerouted. This flight didn't take off. So, prosecution is appropriate. Should this guy get the book thrown at him? No, but a misdemeanor sentence, some sort of probation is, I think, a just result in this case. You just can't do this type of thing.
Yeah, Gigi, I mean, listen, as a prosecutor myself, having evaluated something like this, if they could demonstrate to me as a defense lawyer, I would be getting records and medical records to prove the panic disorder, to prove he's not otherwise a danger. He's got a service dog. We don't know what that's for. He did a stupid, ridiculous thing. But there's also sometimes alternates to incarceration or to punishment, where they put you on a period of like probation for a little period of time. And if you're successful with that and you pay your fines, they actually dismiss the case against you so that you don't have to have a criminal record your whole life, so long as they know that you're treating, taking your meds, and doing what's necessary not to be a continuing danger. How would you be defending this case, Gigi?
Well, it's going to be hard to put up the defense of I didn't do it, right? We've got dozens of witnesses, probably recordings to the effect. We have a confession by Antonio Murdoch. So the not me defense is not going to work. So now the defense has to go on the defense of saying, hey, look, this is someone with a history of mental illnesses. This man suffers from panic attacks. They occur in confined spaces. It's not every time, but sometimes. And in this case, that's what happened. I think that is very strong mitigating evidence to give him, like both of you said, a lighter sentence, or a sentence that's more in line with treating the underlying issue, which is this is someone that suffers from panic attacks. Having some sort of length of probation with court-appointed counseling should get this guy ready for society in no time.
Yeah, Neama, I just look at the case just from a human interest standpoint, and I'm like, I think we're going to see a lot more of these things. I think anxiety, we all know from COVID-19, medications being prescribed, people who are rolling into addiction has increased dramatically, financial pressures, fear of getting COVID on the plane itself if you have this panic disorder. I mean, what do we expect? Are we going to be seeing a lot of these kind of instances? Because it's pretty aggressive that you would jump off a plane, rush past people, open up that emergency door and slide down and shoot. That says to me this guy really was in a state of absolute panic. Are we going to see more of these kind of crimes?
We are going to see more, Bob. In addition to fears of COVID, airlines are really rolling back these protections for service animals, right? A lot of people have taken advantage. They've brought peacocks and exotic animals on the plane, saying they need them for anxiety. So, the federal government has allowed the airlines to restrict which animals they deem as appropriately service animals. So, to the extent that people who do legitimately have anxiety and other issues aren't able to travel with their service animals, it's something that I anticipate to be a problem going forward as well.
Yeah, Gigi, something else that I found interesting about this case is these safety doors, these cabins, and then the chute comes down where you could slide down. You go into the airplane, they're always telling you about that. I mean, I guess we're glad that we at least know from this case they did a public service in a certain sense, that they work. But it was surprising to me that it did work, that you could do this. But nevertheless, I mean, do you think those doors open all the time? Are they that easy to get to? And somebody could just open that? Could that happen mid-flight? I know I'm asking you something outside of your wheelbase, but that's something that came to my mind.
Well, you would hope that they're easy enough to open that in a case of emergency, whoever's seated at that seat is able to open it with ease. You don't want it to be so easy that it'll just pop open on any flight. I've been on a couple of flights and I've never had that fear or concern. So it is relieving to know that it is easy to access and open in the case of an emergency. I don't think it's likely that it'll open if it wasn't forced open by someone maneuvering it. And it is good to know that they work. I feel relief.
Yeah, something is telling me that, and we asked our people out there, let us know. I mean, probably maybe it only works when it hits ground or it's on water or something of that nature. I just don't know, but I would be curious if our fans would let us know what they know about that. Guys, listen, you were awesome. I really appreciate you guys being on here. It's always a pleasure to have great guests like you guys. My name is Bob Bianchi. You can find me at rbianchiesq. Give a shout out to #LegalBeagle if you'd like. We're going to have regularly scheduled program coming up. I want you guys to have a great, happy, and healthy new year.